Good morning, everyone. It is Wednesday, May the 13th, and welcome to 7 Investing Live. This is our live stream event where we showcase several of the stock market's most intriguing opportunities. We typically host every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We've got a 2-hour delay here today because we've got a very special topic. My name is Simon Erickson. I am the founder and CEO of 7 Investing, joined by Heather Horton, our executive producer of the show. And that special topic I referenced is one of our all-time favorite companies at 7 Investing. Rocket Lab just reported its first quarter 2026 results. We're digging into a little bit of those, perhaps kind of a bit of an overview of some of the things that they just announced. But then I want to take the second part of the call to kind of talk about what should expectations be if you're investing in Rocket Lab right now. This is a great company. There's a lot of fantastic history we have with this one. What are we looking at going forward, and what's the progress these guys are making? This is probably going to be part one of a multi-series event. Rocket Lab is a very complicated and fantastic company doing some amazing things right now. I don't want to sell ourselves short in the 30 minutes that we'll have here this morning. But let's go ahead and jump in and take a look at what we saw in the first quarter here of 2026. Just got an investor event from the company. Doing, again, a lot of exciting things. Peter Beck and Adam Spice, of course, the longtime CEO and CFO of Rocket Lab, came out there, and we're going to jump into these first quarter 2026 results here in a moment. But I think it is worth pointing out that we are not fair weather fans of Rocket Lab. We are not just jumping on the bandwagon for a stock that's done very, very well here in the recent years. I mean, Rocket Lab and 7 Investing have a tenured history. Actually, we went back to immediately after the company did its SPAC IPO in the summer of 2021. Actually put it on the scorecard that very, very first month, August 2021. You can see the first recommendation at $10 a share of Rocket Lab when it comes in the public markets. And then we kept adding on. In February 2022, we added another stake to it. We put another stake in March 2023, and then another one in January 2024. This is a company that we followed basically in the entire history of its public debut. And as you can see, the returns, we've done very well on the 7 Investing scorecard with this. If you kind of look at this graphically, where we recommended Rocket Lab, going back there from its debut in 2021 all the way through 2024, we've now seen the public markets appreciate the amazing things that this amazing company has been doing, especially here in the last 2 years or so. It's been rewarding, not only for the business, but also as investors to see a lot of that really coming to fruition and being appreciated by the markets out there. And of course, today, with Rocket Lab at a share price of $121 a share, has done very, very well here in 2026, and probably is going to do just fine going forward as well. But it wasn't always this way. I mean, if you look at kind of a lot of the green dots when we were putting our original coverage out there, Rocket Lab was still a newcomer to the public markets, didn't have a whole lot of tenure or credibility, kind of was looked at as a neat company that was doing some neat things, but kind of a lot of investors were very hesitant because this was a capital intensive business. This was something that was very hard to do. And the space economy really wasn't a mature market at all, right? You didn't know what you were getting into out there. You were going up against not only Elon Musk, but Jeff Bezos. There was a lot of uncertainties about Rocket Lab, even in 2023 and 2024. And I think something that 7 Investing did really right was we went out there and we defended them. Back in March 2024, the stock was selling for about $4 a share. I was willing to stick my neck out there and publish a public-facing article saying that, at that time, I thought the stock was worth $22 a share, had 453% upside. And it was not just throwing darts or, superstition or astrology or witchcraft or anything. It was actually based upon true discounted cash flow valuation analysis. This has been something I've always incorporated into my analysis for early stage companies like Rocket Lab. Look at what the potential is. Look at how large the addressable market is. But also, is Rocket Lab executing well? What is their expectation of their upcoming revenues and their contracts and the things they're going to hit in the next year or 2 years? And then bring that through the entire income statement. Recognize that there is going to be scalability in the business and that you're going to actually generate cash flows for your investors over time. That's how I came up with $22 a share back in March of 2024. Needless to say, if you followed that advice, you got a 30x return in 2 years. That has done very, very well, not just for me personally and my family, but anyone who followed those the advice on that in early 2024 has hopefully done very, very well with this stock. And so I wanted to kind of say that, that's all the history. We're always forward looking in the markets. I do think it's worth pointing out, though, that, we're not just throwing darts on Rocket Lab. We've got now the 9th iteration of this discounted cash flow that I'm going to talk about here in a moment. But we were very right on this one. So I'm okay with taking a very brief victory lap on a 30x return in 2 years. Let's look at the first quarter of 2026. We got a lot of updates from Rocket Lab. I don't want to really go through any of these in super detail. I'd rather just kind of like hit the highlights on it. You can certainly go to their investor relations page and look at the presentation and kind of get their perspective on it. But I do think it's worth pointing out that, we did have record revenues, $200 million in revenue, record gross margins, record backlog now over $2 billion. That was under $2 billion in the fourth quarter, now at $2.2 billion for the first quarter of forward bookings that are tied to contractual backlog. And then we've also got some updates on Neutron, right? We now have an undisclosed customer that has signed on for 5 Neutron launches through the year 2029 and some other exciting things as well, right? So as of the first quarter of 2021, the first quarter of 2026, we've got 31 new launches that are booked for Electron. Of course, that's their smaller scale rocket they've got out there. They've got 70 plus launches that are in backlog. That's the highest in their history they've already seen. They're anticipating another record year here for 2026. They've already got 8 that have completed here year to date in the first quarter. Always good to see Electron doing well. It's also really exciting to see that Neutron, which is going through qualification and testing right now, has now got an undisclosed customer that wants to do 5 Neutron launches through the year 2029. Of course, it's going to be a much larger payload. You're going to get a much higher revenue per launch out of Neutron, perhaps $50, $55 million, maybe even higher than that for certain missions, versus an $8 to $9 million revenue per launch that you get out of Electron. This is the economies of scale catching on for rocket launch. Medium lift is going to be a much better and more economical launch. You're going to be producing more profits and more cash flows for the business once Neutron actually hits the pad. The business also has got space systems. This is the manufacturing of satellites and their associated components. You can kind of see that through several acquisitions that Rocket Lab has made in recent years. They now have a variety of different components that they can manufacture. They're not just launching others, manufactured rockets, others manufactured satellites into orbit using their own rockets. They're actually designing and manufacturing those satellites and the components as well for customers that need them. So you can kind of see that Rocket Lab really got a bunch of sweetheart deals there. We had a kind of a difficult economy for satellite manufacturing after interest rates got so much higher in 2022. They went out there and they used a lot of that money that they raised in their SPAC IPO to go out there and acquire the capabilities of some really, really cool IP and some really, really good teams. And they folded right into space systems. We've also seen that Rocket Lab has now opened up shop in Europe through the Mynaric acquisition that they closed. This is kind of giving them an entry level into Europe, not just working with the Department of Defense and Space Force in the United States. You're now starting to work with several different companies and government agencies in Europe. It's going to be interesting to see how that progresses in recent years. And so a real quick recap of what Rocket Lab looked like here in the first quarter. Again, all-time high in revenues, up 63% year over year, to $200 million for the first quarter. They have a backlog of over $2 billion, as we mentioned. They're guiding for another 10 to 20% sequential growth for the second quarter coming up here. You've got some new contracts that are on the bookings, and that are already locked in, especially for the HASTE hypersonic program. That's been something that's been really good for the company here recently. We'll talk about that in the next slide. And the Neutron, is still in qualification and testing, but they're expecting for the very first launch to be within the next year. Again, the 5 expected launches through 2029 with an undisclosed customer. So cool. Some neat stuff going on with Rocket Lab. Let's look at this from an investor's perspective now, because for me, we know Rocket Lab is awesome. We love Peter Beck. We think he's awesome. We love the space economy. It's very exciting. But if we're going out to make money on this stock, what is it we need to look at? Well, it really is as objective as we possibly can about what are these shares actually worth. Are you getting a fantastic bargain on them, or do you think you're overpaying a little bit for them? At $4 a share, this is a screaming buy. This is something that we said, based on what we know about Rocket Lab and the most objective, most likely outcome of this company, it's probably worth at least a 5 bagger. You're probably going to get 5 times your money if you get in there. I've now done 9 iterations of a discounted cash flow valuation model for Rocket Lab, the most recent being done in August of 2025. If that phrase is new to you, a discounted cash flow basically predicts all of a company's future cash flows, brings them back to the present using an effective discounted rate of the weighted average cost of capital of the company we can raise money at, and then says, based on all those future cash flows, we think that the equity valuation of the company today is intrinsically worth this much per share. And so in August of 2025, estimated Rocket Lab was worth $27 a share. I'm going to update that over the next 2 weeks. This is a fairly complicated exercise, but some initial things that we looked at versus August 2025 versus today. We did get full year fiscal 2025 numbers. We now got first quarter 2026 numbers. The actual revenues for Rocket Lab, even though they're all-time high and record for the company itself, the revenues are actually lower than what I was expecting when I estimated it was worth $27 a share, largely because we haven't yet seen a Neutron launch. We were hoping that was going to happen in late 2025. Now it's looking like late 2026. However, because of the HASTE contracts, which is a higher payload, larger payload, and a more expensive revenue per launch, actually revenue per launch is actually above my expectations. I was expecting for 2025, it would be closer to $8.9 million revenue per launch. Rocket Lab actually finished here at $9.5 million in revenue per launch. You're getting more per launch that Electron's bringing things out into orbit. And now this is the really big one for me, is the backlog. Rocket Lab announced, record backlog at the end of 2025, $1.85 billion, now to $2.2 billion. Look at my expectation at the end of 2025. I was thinking Rocket Lab was going to be at $5.2 billion of backlog. That would be a 5x increase over what they had at the end of 2024. Simon, are you crazy? What are you thinking? How are you going to increase that so high? Well, we've got some really, really big programs that are, in effect, really trying to contract, independent launch providers like Rocket Lab to do things. Golden Dome, Department of Defense has got stuff going on. Space Force has got things going on. These are some really massive contracts that Rocket Lab is going to be winning. They might not all hit in the year 2026. They might go all the way out through 2030 or even beyond. But I'm expecting that Rocket Lab is going to grab an even larger share of these going forward. It was great to see a backlog going from about $1 billion a year ago to $1.85 billion at the end of this year. You would look at that and say, wow, an 85% increase in backlog when you're increasing revenue at 63% a year, that's incredible, right? You're just basically putting more business in the hopper you can then manage over the next 5 years. I think that's going to grow exponentially. I think that you're going to see a step change here in 2026 in terms of the backlog that's on the books for future contracts. So still waiting to see that. That was something that I built into the initial model. Again, this is a fairly complex one. You can kind of see all of the modeling, a little sneak peek at how detailed these spreadsheets are and how seriously we take this, especially for the backlogs and all the things that are coming on up there. But I think there's a couple of takeaways that I do want to touch on before we get into a discussion about Rocket Lab. And again, you can see this is from the subscriber call of November 2025. I pulled some of the things from the last valuation out there into this. I think that Rocket Lab's business and its ultimate valuation are going to be driven mostly by its space systems division. That's the manufacturing arm of this company. Right now, we talk a lot about launches. We talk about how many, booked launches they have with Electron, how many 5 Neutron launches are on the books right now for going forward. But if you look at the overall backlog that Rocket Lab has in place today, already 75% of it is going to be in the space systems. That's something where manufacturing, you can recognize the economies of scale. You can actually leverage your overhead. Once you start churning out more and more components, you're actually going to be capturing higher margins on that. Once you get the staffing, once you get the kind of infrastructure in place to do a lot of those things. And of course, the reusability of rockets too is going to help a lot as well. I think that longer term, my expectation is that the launch division of this company is going to kind of at steady state account for about 10% of Rocket Lab's overall revenues. Whereas space systems, the manufacturing of those systems is going to be somewhere between 70 and 90%. And then a third division, which we're still learning a little bit more from, as Rocket Lab hints at a future division they're wanting to develop, the Constellation Group, where they're actually going to manage the infrastructure and then sell it piecemeal to customers that want to use their capacity of the infrastructure they have in place. That would be the remainder. Maybe 10 to 20% of the business would be for Constellation. where Rocket Lab spends all of their own money up front to deploy the infrastructure. I think it's also worth pointing out there are physical capacity constraints with this business. This is not a company like Google or like Facebook, where you can flip a switch and immediately increase the ad load, or things that can digitally happen at in an infinite scale. It takes time, it takes people, it takes money to manufacture and then to deploy these things that you're building and then actually get them launched out into outer space. There's only so many of those Rocket Lab can take on at any given time. I want to keep that in mind as we're assessing this and evaluating this as investors. I do think the Golden Dome program, there's going to be some big contracts coming on board here. We've already heard a lot about that in recent years. We're going to see even more interesting to see as this catches on. And of course, more and more Neutron launches, especially as we start getting some more disclosure about those customers. I think those are going to be some of the near-term drivers. So I'm going to leave it at that for today. Rocket Lab, again, this is going to have to be at least a 2, maybe a 3-part series, because the next step of this is going to be taking these inputs of the valuation and the results we just got last week from the first quarter, and then kind of combining them to what the takeaways are and do a lot of this modeling going forward. I want to combine those into a second part where we say, okay, let's go out there again. If we said last time that Rocket Lab was worth $22 and it was selling at $4 a share, certainly completely undervalued at that point. We then updated that last year to $27. How much of a jump did we get from 27 to today? Let's go ahead and be objective about that. Look at it, investors. And that's going to be the next step that I'm going to be doing here with 7 Investing. This is something I'd really encourage if you're a Rocket Lab investor or you're interested in this company. Please take me up on the research that I'm doing and that I've done for the last 6 years, or 5 years, excuse me, to say, hey, objectively, let's look at the right things. Let's get the drivers of this business. Let's get the modeling right. Let's be a little bit more methodical about how we're figuring out what the stock is worth, rather than just stock price goes up, stock price goes down. This has been a very volatile one, as you've seen, over the last 5 years. And so if you do want some more Rocket Lab coverage, and Heather, I'm going to turn it over for our discussion in a moment, but I do include all of the discounted cash flow inputs and assumptions in our 7 Investing Community Forum. There's the link that you'll see. Heather is going to put that into the show notes. You don't have to remember that or write it down right now. We're going to have that in this video show notes for you to click on to easily get into the 7 Investing Community Forum. And again, this is something that we have a free section that people can talk about anything going on in the stock market. We've had some interesting discussions about some companies like the Trade Desk, Rocket Lab here recently, some other companies were reporting earnings here the last week. But then if you actually follow along with 7 Investing and you sign up with the 7 Investing membership, we really get into the trenches and the nitty-gritty of companies specifically. And so for Rocket Lab, if you do sign up with 7 Investing, 7investing.com/subscribe, get you access to all of our actual recommendation reports, get you into the ongoing discussion of the community forum. That also gives you all the other content we have too, the best buys every month, the watch list, the premium content every month, a variety of different things out there. And so I really encourage you to take a look at 7 Investing. I think this is a really fun service. I've had a ton of fun running it since March of 2020. It's been phenomenal to see the returns that we've gotten out of Rocket Lab, over 4 recommendations over that time. But that's one company over a scorecard that we've looked at over 200 individual and unique businesses, some of which have also hit the stratosphere and been 10 baggers or beyond for our own scorecard. So check it out. And again, the best part of all, absolutely free for your first 7 days. 7investing.com/subscribe. If you check us out, you want to look at all the premium content, you don't have to pay a single penny for the first week. And if it's not for you, you can cancel. There's no strings attached. There's no commitment. Just go out and check out our content. Look at the Rocket Lab reports. Get into the nitty-gritty with me. Let's start looking at these as an investor. Let's be objective in how we're evaluating companies out there. And hopefully we're going to find some more Rocket Labs here as well, because there's plenty of opportunities out there in the stock market for growth style investors. Heather, I'm going to leave it with at that. I am a little bit more markety than maybe I tend to do on a lot of these shows, but I think that's fair game, because Rocket Lab, man, we've done all right with that one in the last couple of years.
Yeah, you definitely have. What brought you to Rocket Lab in the first place?
I'm in Houston and I'm a space dork. I love NASA. And I love space economy. You had the right leader in place. There were a lot of companies that were trying to raise money in 2021. If you remember, this was the SPAC craze. There was a bunch of them that were going public. Rocket Lab and Peter Beck really had the credibility. If you follow along with his story, everything that he's done ever since he was kind of putting rocket packs on himself and a bicycle in New Zealand as a teenager, just the right guy at the right time and just kind of latched on immediately. Ever since the SPAC IPO, was immediately intrigued.
And so, with it being a kind of volatile stock, but has been up and to the right, it's definitely one, it sounds like, for longer term investing, which is your style, anyways, not for day trading.
It's a tough one. There's been a lot of people have said, they're going to short Rocket Lab because it's getting too expensive. And I kind of, encourage people to not try to time this too much, because you're going to see these announcements of a new deal or smashing quarterly earnings. There's a lot of momentum in the shares right now, but you also want to be careful if you're day trading or short-term trading a stock like this. This is just so volatile all the time.
And what are the top things you're looking forward to with Rocket Lab? I know you talked about the deals that they've announced.
Yeah, scaling things up. Rocket Lab got some sweetheart deals on acquisitions in the last couple of years. And so now the capabilities for space systems are vastly beyond where they were even in 2022. That means you can land larger contracts. You can do more things and become this end-to-end space company that Rocket Lab wants to become. That's important because this kind of becomes the lion's share of the profits go to the most integrated players, right? If you're a contractor, you're the Department of Defense, Space Force, or anything like that, you probably want to work with as few of vendors as you possibly can that are reliable, that you can give as much business to, because you want to continue the program. You want to keep working with them over time. Rocket Lab, when you bring in more teams that are already kind of established and have those relationships in place, now you got more capabilities. You're going to start seeing larger and larger contracts. And so the first thing is like, how big are the deals going to be? And then what is the margin profile going to look like for the Space Systems Group specifically? That's going to flow, Heather, to the cash flow statement, which is most interesting to me as an investor, because I want to see not just Rocket Lab grow its top line as quickly as we possibly can, but make sure they're doing it profitably in a way that's good for investors.
And what should investors be watching out for? Or is it just one of those stocks that you just need to have a strong stomach and hold?
SpaceX, and Blue Origin, it's really hard when you're competing against Elon and Jeff Bezos. I mean, SpaceX coming public here is going to flood that balance sheet with a ton of cash. And Elon with a ton of cash is a disruptive force for anything. And so Rocket Lab has carved out its niche, which is a little bit different than the supersized launches that Starship and SpaceX is doing. A lot of SpaceX right now is still dedicated to its internal operations, Starlink and things that Elon wants to do internally. But you're going to see more and more overlap, I think, between those swim lanes of what SpaceX is doing and then what Rocket Lab is doing. And of course, Bezos has got a vested interest in this as well. Not as far along as Elon is in the space race, but it's hard to discount him as well, too, because he's a very motivated entrepreneur as well.
For sure. I am excited to continue talking about Rocket Lab and learning more about them.
Absolutely. So we're going to thank you for the segue. We're going to talk a little bit more about Rocket Lab next week. Friday, I'm going to be traveling. I'm going to be at the Money Show Masters Symposium up in Dallas. If you'd like to grab a drink with me, if you're in the Dallas area, please send me a note on YouTube or at 7 Innovator. They're on X. I would love to meet up with some other investors and talk about Rocket Lab or talk about anything else we want to. I'm going to be presenting 3 next big things to invest in at the Money Show conference. Space Economy was one that we featured last year, talked about Rocket Lab, also talked about Planet Labs. Both of those companies did pretty well in the last year. We're going to be talking about some cool topics, and this is always a lot of fun. So out on Friday, we're going to come back. I'll give you the overview of some of the things I learned from the conference on Monday, and then probably next Wednesday and or Friday, we will reconvene our conversation about Rocket Lab. So this is a fun one. I always just love this company. I'm a big fan of everything they're doing. Let's be a little mindful about the valuation. Seems like we're getting a little rich, perhaps, with a lot of the momentum that's going into this name. But again, let me objectively speak on terms of the valuation. That's what we're going to look at next, and we'll have up for the next show. So again, today, Wednesday, May the 13th. I will see you again next Monday. In the meantime, have a great week. And be safe and be kind to one another. And we'll see you again next Monday after the Money Show Symposium finishes up. Have a great week.